hello, hello, or afternoon if you're on the East Coast. Welcome to the second day of the Mega SKO, the Mega SKO. It's our 3-day community kickoff summit. And today's event, or our whole summit, is brought to you by the team at Modern Sales Pros. If you're not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and, of course, the highest quality revenue leadership community. And our mission is to create an environment for our thousands and thousands of members to answer the toughest revenue questions out there. If you are not a member, you're going to be invited after the summit, and we hope that you'll join our community. This summit would not be possible without our amazing partners who are all over this slide. So, raise the roof, clap, snap for them. Kudos to them for making this happen. They're not only sponsoring this specific awesome masterclass, but they are sponsoring the full 3 days of our summit. If you want to go show them some love, there's a lot of folks in the booths right now. So hover over to your Goldcast page to the top, click the booths button. I'm doing this like I'm doing a TikTok, and you'll go hang out with them. This week's summit will be full of the latest do's and don'ts for your 2022 SKOs, whether you're in sales or marketing or customer success or product, whatever, there's going to be content for you. This is the first event of our second day, and after this, we're going to have an amazing keynote by Speckett founder Melanie Fillet, and we're going to end the day on a panel on how to become a CRO, CEO, whatever kind of C-blank-O you want to be. And of course, tomorrow will be a full day of amazing events as well. If you want to check that out, my little TikTok arm, go to the top of your Goldcast page and click the agenda. Here is, the agenda for today will be Pete's going to introduce himself. He's going to dive into the content. He's going to answer some questions. I'm going to go backstage, and it's going to be a really great time. And of course, housekeeping notes before anyone asks, yes, this is being recorded. Yes, you're going to have access to the recording. I know someone's going to ask again, and I'll hop in and say, yes, you're going to get the recording, and you're going to want the recording because this is going to be amazing content. And please be interactive as possible. Pete's here to answer all of your amazing questions. He's here to get the little commentary from you. So use that chat feature, use that Q&A feature. And of course, I'm going to pass it over to Pete, who's going to introduce himself. I'm going to head backstage. Good luck, Pete, and see you after.
Thank you, Taylor. Here, let me go ahead and share my screen, ideally the correct screen here. Boop. All right, I think I did it. Does everybody see Ted Lasso and Zach Galifianakis? Delightful. So hey everyone, we're going to be talking about data-driven sales coaching here today. It's one of my favorite topics because it kind of combines the chocolate and peanut butter, two great tastes that taste great together, of really thoughtful analysis and kind of data-driven sales excellence and coaching and changing behavior and making people better, which is one of the things that's fun about management. So for folks who don't know me, I'm Pete Kazanjy. I am one of the co-founders of Atrium, makers of fine data-driven sales management software. I also happen to be the founder of Modern Sales Pros as well. And before I did both of those things, I was the founder of a software company called Talent Bin, which is where I first kind of started my sales management, sales leadership journey. I was one of our co-founders. I became our first salesperson when I figured out, like, hey, this stuff doesn't sell itself. It needs someone else to sell it. Sales manager, sales manager, sales leader eventually were acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. Sales organization was around like 20 or so folks. And then I was responsible for new product sales at Monster Worldwide, 1,000-person sales organization. So a little bit of a scale difference there. And coming out of that, I wrote a book on startup sales called Founding Sales. That's all about early stage sales for people who are either first-time sellers, first-time sales managers, founders, promoted SDRs, product managers who are going into sales, et cetera, et cetera. It's there's one right here. Look at that. And so just for folks, for folks context, today's session, of course, is sponsored by Atrium, my software company. Atrium makes data-driven sales management software whose sole existence is to help AE, SDR, and AM CSM managers use metrics and data to improve rep and team performance. That's literally what Atrium exists for. One of the cool way to think about it is it gives managers data-driven management superpowers. One of the really neat things about it is it only takes about 90 seconds to set up. So it's lickety split. You are instantly understanding what's going on with your team and kind of where there are shortfalls and how you can actually change behaviors to make people better. Before we get into some of the topics here today, a couple of my favorite coaching resources as of late, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the materials that are in these guys here. These are some of my favorite books. Recently, The 5 Secrets of a Sales Coach by Hillman Sori and Corey Bray of Closed Loop Sales Training, Sales Consulting, Consultancy. And then, of course, Michelle Vezana's Crushing Quota. Michelle and Jason Jordan, of course, wrote Cracking the Sales Management Code, which is all about data-driven sales management, management by metric, and what have you. Crushing Quota is more focused on the coaching component of it, so how to take that stuff and then use it to apply to improve rep behavior. So these are some of my favorite things. We're actually going to we're giving away copies. If you want to go ahead and sign up to get a copy of both of these, there's a link in the chat right now. You can just pop over there and raise your hand and we'll send you a couple of copies of these books because it will really help you raise your game. Cool. So let's talk about data-driven sales coaching and why managers should coach and care about this. So one of the big things that that people may not realize is that high-performing managers end up being a massive source of advantage within sales organizations. All sorts of great things come out of it: higher rep productivity, higher performing reps, better rep retention, which is kind of a big deal right now as there's a lot of churn going on in the market, and even just like reps doing more work, and it also shows up in the bottom line as well. It's like all of those behaviors. And so these are a couple kind of choice statistics that I pulled out of Michelle's book on sales coaching. What's interesting is that the top 25% of managers end up generating 40% more revenue than the bottom 25%, 40% more revenue. And so when you look at that on a pure attainment basis, right? So like, I don't know, 8 reps for a manager, crossed with, 600, 800K, $1 million in quota, usually what that ends up netting out to is around $3.5 million of more attainment per year when a manager is high performing. Not only that, and kind of where that comes from is that they actually get more of their reps to quota. That's the big differentiators. And what they're doing there is, so rather than like everybody can have a high performer who can kind of quote unquote carry the team or get the team to quota, the way to really, really outperform is to get all of your foot soldiers performing well. And so the organization, so the way that you do that, of course, is to invest in those managers, to make those managers more successful. And so the organizations who engaged in coaching ended up realizing 10% more revenue across all of their teams. And the way that was driven was by enabling managers. Right? So one of the things that we think about oftentimes with sales enablement is we say, hey, rep onboarding, rep coaching, let's get them better at objection handling. Let's get them better at open-ended questions. Let's get them better at discovery. All those things are great. The problem is that you have a lot of reps and maybe not that many sales enablement people. And so what you can do is you can invest in the trainers, right? Train the trainer, enable the manager whose job is to manage. And so organizations that invest that that budget in the managers as compared to like only focusing on the reps end up driving more revenue. which makes sense because what ends up happening is now you've got a bunch of great coaches who then can spend their time making those reps better and being higher performance there. And so the challenge that most organizations have is that they don't do that. They don't enable their managers, and they don't enable them along two primary vectors. One is they don't train the managers. They don't focus on sales management training for the managers, such that they can do sales training and sales coaching with the reps, for the reasons that we kind of talked about previously. And the problem is that you really do need to do that, because if you think about where managers come from, typically they're promoted ICs, individual contributors. And so where those skills of coaching and analysis and intervention, what have you, are not really things that account executives are doing on a day-to-day basis. They're selling. The second thing, especially as relates to data-driven sales management, is that analysis, like data consumption and interpretation, is really not a skill that those ICs or managers are going to acquire organically. And then cross that with the fact that like the current status quo of data-driven sales management ends up being what we like to call a wall of charts. Here's a wall of charts. Here you go. Figure out what's going on in there. There's a lot of spaghetti, right? Those are not really set up. Those are set up for analysts. They're set up for data science people, et cetera. And so these two things combine to create problems for managers to truly achieve their goals of being good data-driven coaches, data-driven managers. And so if you think about the things that managers ought to be doing with their reps, yeah, they should be doing deal inspection and strategy, but there's a whole other panoply of things that they ought to be doing. They should be doing database one-on-ones. They should be tracking goals for reps, not just bookings, but precursor goals as well. I do a bunch of sessions on setting and managing with goals, but like goals are really important, not just on a booking standpoint. They should be doing database one-on-ones. They should be monitoring the ramp of new hires, because that's an extraordinarily critical period in a rep's life cycles, making sure that they're coming into band, especially around precursor metrics. And then on an ongoing basis, what they should be doing is, playing whack-a-mole, identifying issues that pop up with reps. There's always something new. There's always something new. And so being able to identify that issue, get ahead of it, fix it, and then move on to the next one is a really important managerial behavior, along with kind of the inverse, which is saying, hey, this rep right here is outperforming for these reasons right here. That's crazy. Let's go ahead and standardize that across the rest of the team. And by doing that, we'll make everybody more successful by standardizing on that success. So these are the things that managers ought to be doing. The problem is because of this situation right here, usually what managers end up spending their time doing is this. They just, let's talk about deals. What's going on with this deal? Hey, when's that coming in? Let's do some deal strategy over here. And this is not surprising, because if you think of where a lot of AE managers come from, they're previously promoted account executives. And guess what? This is what they were doing, spending their time doing as a seller. And so the challenge with this is that it's very low leverage. And if you think about the things that you ought to be doing, the reasons why you should use data to manage and coach, it's all about getting leverage on your time as a manager and getting out of anecdata. And so if you think about kind of the current behaviors that a lot of managers engage in, a lot of them are extremely low leverage. So like riding along on calls. It can feel very productive. The problem is that you can only be on one call at a time. Are you on the right call versus another call where an issue pops up, et cetera? And the same is kind of true even if you're like listening to calls that have been recorded. Again, it's higher leverage than riding along, because maybe you can listen to them at 1.5x. Maybe a rep will go and say like, hey, can you go ahead and listen to this call? The problem is you're still kind of like trying to suss out what's going on by like listening to a bunch of these things. One of the challenges kind of tied to this is that a lot of us have remote sales organizations right now, so it's very difficult to do organic instrumentation, kind of like listening to people on the sales floor, even if you as a manager are like doing email or like working on slides or like doing reporting or what have you, you can't really hear what's going on with your staff, especially you can't hear like 3 or 4 people in parallel. And then of course the worst situation here is the old like super manager. I'm going to swoop in, I'm going to close deals for you. This is extraordinarily low leverage. And it's kind of like a variant of this one right here, where there's only one of you. If you have 6 reps or you have 8 reps, or God forbid you have 10 reps, there's no way that you can be on all of their closing calls and all their down funnel calls. What you should be doing is getting them successful. If they have problems, depending on which call it is that they have issues on, and identifying where in their sales motion they have those problems. And so the reason why data helps you with that leverage and kind of getting out of that anecdote is because with data, it's much higher leverage. You can see around corners. You can look across the entire team and see where the echoes of issues are or outperformance, and then dive in there as appropriate. Right. And then moreover, with data, what you can do is when you implement a fix, hey, I need you to do X, Y, Z. I need you to stop doing this. I need you to start doing this. What you can do is you can then loop back again and say, did that happen? Did those untouched opportunity counts go down? Did that prospecting behavior go up? Did that conversion rate out of disco go up? Well, rather than anecdotal with anecdote, kind of like, oh, it feels like maybe that happened, it's sticking, or whatever. Like, we literally can see what's going on there and say, hey, like, it's sticking. Or, man, we had that conversation about you raising your activity levels. I'm like, something's still not happening there. So like, what's going on here? So these are the reasons why I would submit to you that it's extremely important for managers to use data to coach. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about like how to do this in practice. One of my kind of favorite frameworks for data-driven sales management is this thing called the OODA loop that is actually borrowed from fighter pilot strategy. It was innovated by this guy named John Boyd. This is actually a really fun book. It's maybe not, it's not as practical as the other books that we were kind of talking about earlier, but it's actually really quite fascinating. And it applies to lots of things. It applies to startups, but it especially applies to sales management. And so what OODA stands for is observe, orient, decide, and act. And then what happens is you loop back again, right? That's why it's called a loop. And so this is in sales management, we do the same thing. We observe, we see what the situation is, what's going on with this rep, what's going on with this rep, what's going on with this rep. We then orient. This is essentially reasoning, like, oh, this rep has a bookings problem. Why is that? I then investigate, I orient, I do like incremental like inspection. I then get to the fact that I have I have a hypothesis about what the issue is. Then I act, right, to solve that. And then I don't know if that act actually solves it. It's just a hypothesis. Now I have to loop back again and say, cool, did the metric change? Did the behavior actually change? And did it positively impact the thing that we needed to do? And so this is what this looks like in sales management. And so I think a lot of people can kind of like empathize with this column right here, where that kind of observe and detect situation without data, it's oftentimes like, oh man, I didn't see that. Like, I got blindsided at the end of the quarter when this rep didn't hit their quota, or missed pretty heavily, or this SDR didn't get to their opportunity creation goals on a monthly basis or whatever. The next thing is like, if I'm going to inspect, really all you got is kind of like asking questions, kind of like eliciting anecdote. Hey, what's going on with XYZ, right? The problem, of course, is that when you go and decide, when you want to decide and take a course of action, you don't know if you're right, because like you kind of just have a bunch of opinions. And then as a result, it's very difficult to act, because like you don't want to be that asshole coming off the top rope if you're wrong. A lot of people are worried about being wrong, and so instead they just kind of paralyzed. And so what the better way of doing this, of course, with data is allows you to say, hey, I see something funky over here. I see something going on over here. I'm seeing around corners here. You know what? I'm going to ask some incremental questions here. Kind of the example we were saying earlier, like, hey, I see that this rep's bookings are tracking poorly. or I see that their a precursor metric, like their opportunity advancements, their stage advancements, are off pace. Why is that? Let's go ahead and dig into the data. Let's like ask some incremental questions, maybe some looking at incremental reports. We'll get into that a little bit here in a second. Oh, I see. I have a hypothesis. This seems to be the problem. There seems to be a pipeline management problem, as indicated by a bunch of untouched ops. There seems to be a new account engagement problem by this SDR because they're doing lots of activity, but they're not actually having new accounts come into their pipeline. Interesting. That feels like that might be the root cause here. Okay, let's prescribe an action. Hey, I need you to schedule a couple hours a week to manage that pipeline because my God, those untouched opportunity KPIs are really bad. And guess what? If you're not touching your ops, they're not going to close. So, and like that's a prescription, and then we loop back again. And so that's a way better way of running your life as a manager than this way over here. This is kind of how to put this into practice. This was more conceptual. I'm a big fan of cadences and operating rhythms and like embedding it into your workflow. And so this is how to do that. So what you can do is you create a set of assets. This is specifically as relates to like one-on-ones. One-on-ones is distinct from pipeline reviews. We'll talk about that a little bit more here in a second, but create an agenda, right? Create the relevant data assets, and then put time on the calendar, recurring time and prep time on the calendar. And then what happens here is this just loops, right? So ahead of the one-on-one, the manager reviews the data, kind of sniffs out what's going on there, gets ready for the session, discusses the information with the rep, and then they agree to take action, and then we loop back again. In my case, my one-on-one cadence with my reps is I do a half hour every 2 weeks. That's because our one-on-ones are distinct from pipeline reviews and deal strategy, so we don't kind of like muddy the two things together. So we only focus on coaching stuff and personal issues and kind of topics like that in our one-on-ones. And so that ends up being like it's a good amount of time, so you have a good offset to say, hey, did that behavior change? Like, are we advancing against the specific topic that we're working on? A great framework for this is discussed in Corey Bray and Hillman Sori's 5 Secrets of a Sales Coach. I know I sound like a total fanboy here, but like it's such a fun book because it's written as a narrative, right? It's not like my book, Founding Sales, is kind of a little bit like a textbook. It's maybe a little bit dry, but it's like super exhaustive. This one is just like an amazing page turner. It's so much fun. There's a bunch of different characters in it, but you're learning this sales coaching methodology within it around like identifying the challenge of the rep the current challenge that we're tackling, outlining kind of like what it is that we're going to do about it, putting into action the specific plan, like this task 1, task 2, task 3, task 4, characterizing the consequences to the rep associated with not resolving the issue in question. It's not like, oh, you're going to go on a PIP. It's kind of like MedPIC actually. Characterizing to them what the negative consequences are of inaction, like, oh, I won't be able to pay off my college debt, or I won't be able to get promoted, or and then also flipping it around and characterizing the positive business outcome. In this case, I guess it's not positive business outcomes, it's like positive personal outcomes. To them, I know this is like very force management, like MedPicky here, but it's fun, right? And because that way they're going to be really bought in on that. And then next we got to hold them accountable. And so this is the methodology that these guys talk about in there. That happens to pair very well with like a good operating rhythm that has good assets in place. So kind of some examples here. We're going to get into how to operationalize this, and then we're going to talk about like a little bit of like examples, kind of like case studies of kind of data-driven coaching in action. But just to kind of give you kind of a sense of like what is not coaching versus coaching. Not coaching would be things like, hey, what's up with this deal? Oops, sorry about that. Hey, what's up with this deal? Versus, hey, let's be open-ended about that, right? Like, hey, what's concerning you about this? Can you make this forecast bigger? Probably the worst case scenario. Hey, can you like put a bunch of bullshit in here? Thanks, I need a bigger number, right? Versus, hey, what can we actually do about it? Usually by the time that the forecast is off, like it's too late. Because guess what? Like you got a 60-day sales cycle, 90-day sales cycle, or 120-day sales cycle. Like guess what? Like that ship done sailed 60 days ago. And so instead, what we want to do is like, hey, is there something we can pull forward? Like maybe we can pull a rabbit out of our hat, but it's probably unlikely. More importantly, how do we avoid this situation in the future? That's the crux, right? How do we avoid being in this situation next quarter? I need you to do more activity. What does that even mean, right? Versus, hey, I observed this thing. It feels like your meeting volumes are a little bit low over the last 4 weeks as compared to usual, right? I'm showing up with data that I've observed. What's going on there? What do you think is happening there? Oh, for like I'm being pulled into a bunch of customer success meetings with my paired CSM on a couple of those large deals that closed last month. Oh, wonderful. Okay, well, I hear what you're saying there and why you would think that would maybe be a good idea. The problem is it's impacting your ability to do first meetings, like new first meetings and second meetings with your new biz ops. Do you think that maybe you might be able, I know that you normally like to do that, but like the fact that you closed those 3 monsters last month really is soaking up a bunch of calendar time. Do you think that we might be able to like skimp out on that a little bit, or maybe catch up with the CSM asynchronously, or maybe listen to the chorus or gong calls after the fact rather than you being on those calls? Do you think that might be a nice solution to that, at least momentarily? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Maybe we could do that, right? So now what we've got is we've got a coaching behavior going on here where we suggested and prescribed an action. And then, of course, what we do is we loop back again in 2 weeks and say, hey, did that, whatever the metric was, did those first meetings go up? Did those, did those first meetings go up? Did the second meetings with new business opportunities go up? So you can do this for every single kind of one of these situations. But the idea here is that we're trying to like elicit what's going on and then prescribe, work together to like reveal that. It's kind of like discovery, right? Like just reveal to them the problem and then co-create with them the potential solution there, right? Kind of like lead them to water as opposed to like, hey man, I need you to do more activity. Hey, clean up your pipeline. Great. So let's talk about how to systematize this. I'm a big fan. One of the things that we talk about on the Atrium team all the time until I'm blue in the face and my reps like roll their eyes at me is this notion of calendar is destiny. And so if you have time on the calendar to ensure that things happen, that your operating rhythm happens, it will actually happen. And so I'm a big fan of meetings in order to do this. If you're doing metrics review, you can actually put a recurring task on your calendar, like hyperlinked off to a relevant asset. But these are things where we're actually like coaching is usually going to happen in meetings because that's where we're live together, right? We're on Zoom. Maybe we're in person, which is even better. But that's where those behaviors are changed and those coaching conversations happen. So a good example of this would be like pipeline review. This is something that most people do. But importantly, what you want to do is you want to make sure the content is aligned with the purpose of the meeting. So pipeline review, yeah, maybe it happens weekly, maybe it's with an individual, maybe it's with the team, and then you're doing essentially like deal inspection and strategy. That was kind of this stuff up here. Most people don't need a reminder to do that because they have a tendency to roll like that. But this was probably all in the calendar already. One of the things that I like to do is split out a deal strategy meeting versus a one-on-one meeting. And I do these individually with my staff. Deal strategy meetings happen weekly. It's a half hour. We review critical deals that the rep feels stuck on, right? And the whole idea here is like coaching. Oh man, this blocker came in. He's his objection is XYZ. I've got but I got my 3 champions over here, but they don't have as much power. What can we do about this situation? And then what we're doing is we're actually doing deal strategy and then prescribing actions and action items that come out of that. This is in contrast to a one-on-one meeting where we're not talking about deals, we're talking about the human, we're talking about the rep. So the things that you should be doing in there is reviewing metrics and progress on coaching initiatives. This stuff right here, this stuff. And oops, sorry, wrong slide here, guys. And HR topics, professional development topics, things like that. Again, happening kind of like bi-weekly. And then what we have is like an enlarged version of this, which is the QBR. So it happens quarterly. And what we do there is we look at highlights and lowlights of the last quarter. Our coaching intentions, we like, did we get where we needed to go with respect to the things we were supposed to be focusing on that quarter? Are there new things we did? Wonderful. High five all around. Great. Job's not done. Now we get to do the next improvement area. Are your fastballs smoking? Now we're going to work on the changeup. Okay. Or alternatively, man, we didn't get there. That metric is still problematic. We still have a pipeline management issue. We still have a problem with like opportunity conversion at a proposal. We still have a problem with, talk ratio time or what have you. Got it. Well, we're going to double down on that again this quarter, and maybe we need to get crisper around how to do that, and take another pass at this with a crisper action plan, maybe better characterizing the consequences, and then maybe getting a little crisper on holding accountable. So there are other meetings you could have to kind of bake into your operating rhythm there, but those are ones that I really like there. And then this is kind of like what that looks like in practice. So you can have on a monthly cadence, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then like week by week by week by week. So you can see pipeline review recurring on Wednesday, got the deal strategies peppered in throughout, and then you got one-on-ones stacked up on your on a given day with your team there. So one of the things that's really important when you're doing those coaching conversations is making sure that you have the relevant assets in hands. And so usually what that's going to be like a report or a set of dashboards for that conversation. And so just to refresh folks, one helpful way to think about these assets is, a report is usually answering a question. Right? Like, how many ops has the SDRs created this month so far? Right? How many ops does each AE own right now? How much pipeline is closing in the coming 90 days per rep? So that's a report. It answers a question. And then a dashboard is usually an aggregation of reports. And the way to think about that is like, this should be consumed at this point in time to do these things. And oftentimes this is where people kind of like mess up, is they create these like gigantic kitchen sink dashboards that just are like, oh my God, it's like sprawling. Where is anything? It's already hard enough to interpret these things, but now you got this like sprawling thing. And so it's like, this dashboard right here is for an AE one-on-one to review performance metrics during this time period. This dashboard is different. This dashboard is used at noon every day to see if the SDRs are taking care of business or playing around on TikTok. This dashboard is used on Monday morning sales team meeting to look at our performance last week and our progress so far this month. So you can see that these are different, right? The times are different. And as a result, the content that would be populated within there would be different as well. And so usually when you're populating a dashboard, oftentimes what you're going to want to do is multiple views per metric. A good example of that would be what I like to call a total with a trend. So you got like a total, like the total number of like bookings that have happened so far that quarter, and then maybe a trend like trailing 12 months, grouped by month, maybe grouped by quarter to look at those bookings. And that helps you kind of view trends in addition to where we're at right now in this time period or in the previous time period. Kind of ways to do this would be kind of tried and true is going to be CRM reporting. It's pretty nice. It's already in your CRM, like whether it's Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever. Kind of the downside is it's time consuming. Someone's got to set it up for you. Every metric has to be like built from scratch. And then of course you have to like use your eyeballs to figure out what's going on there. Same is kind of true with business intelligence. So like your Lookers and Tableaus and what have you. Super flexible and powerful if you know how to use it. If you are one of those wizards who can actually do battle with it. Challenge is that many people aren't those wizards, and so usually what you're relying on is like the data team or sales operations or whatever to create dashboards, and then more of you still got the problem of like you got to look at it. And then of course there's this emerging category of software that we call data-driven sales management software, of which Atrium is one example, where it's like a super quick setup. It's automatically monitored. The downside is it's less flexible than your traditional business intelligence and what have you. But usually for most managers who are kind of starting at home plate there, it's more than enough of of power in order for them to do the things that they ought to be doing that probably aren't right now. So this is kind of what that looks like in practice. So you can kind of see we've got a little total here, got a little trend going on here in this case. We've got customer-facing meeting volume, right? So this is how many customer-facing meetings have happened so far this month, and then this is customer-facing meetings on a trailing 30-day basis on a week-by-week basis here. And so what this allows us to do, you can imagine this being in a dashboard, these two tiles being in a dashboard, and very quickly we could look at this and say like, oh, okay, cool. Like Cyril and King Richard are like really hitting the cover off the ball there. That's pretty awesome. Nutsy here, these are kind of silly names from a demo instance. Nutsy here and Michael Darling are a little bit light. Oh, I wonder how long that's been a problem, right? Like, oh, well, let's go ahead and look over here on the trends, because that can help us understand that. So here's Nutsy, he's in green here, and we can see like he was up here and then, whoa, what's going on? Nutsy, break up with his or her significant other, maybe there's a coaching opportunity there, right? And so what we've done there is we've detected what's going on because we had a total and a trend. You can do the same thing with like in a ramping scenario as well. We've got our, customer-facing meeting volume right here, where everybody's, this is all their start dates that have been normalized. We can see who's coming into band, who's maybe like tracking a little bit light behind. Our buddy Herb Muddlefoot here, kind of a little light on his ramp there, etc. And so when you're thinking about designing a dashboard, this is kind of like how to think about that. Like you kind of lay it out in your mind ahead of time, or use an asset like this. They're like, oh, okay, cool. Here's tile one. This is what the time period is going to be. This is what the grouping is going to be. Cool. In this case, here's the same KPI that we're going to look at here, but we're going to do a different time period on it, right? And this is kind of what that looks like in practice, although this is a pretty ugly screenshot. Sorry. Another way you can do this, of course, is with tabular approaches too. So rather than it being charts and kind of like, squiggly lines and bar charts or what have you, you can do things that are like numbers based. And this is actually a screenshot of like a goal tracking table. So that's kind of how to do that. And then before we get into some kind of more stuff around how to actually detect issues, I'm going to give you a little commercial for Atrium, because we really think about this stuff all day long, every day, and we think that we've built something to really give data, AE managers, SDR managers, and what have you, data-driven superpowers. So the way to think about what it is that we do is like we would love to have a world, like imagine a world where every sales manager has all the KPIs that they need for their reps and their team. They don't have to go beg somebody to create it. They don't have to like go and create it themselves. It's already ready already. And then importantly, the stuff is actually already being monitored for them, because staring and comparing and dashboard diving is really for the birds, and they're maybe not all that great at it anyway. And so what we would prefer is for something to be monitoring that stuff for us and doing like proactive goal tracking and kind of alerting us when somebody is off with respect to this metric, or even telling us the root cause of a potential issue. Like this rep has a problem with bookings. It's not because he doesn't have enough ops. It's not because his ASP is off. It's actually because his win rate is problematic, and moreover, his win rate is problematic because as compared to all the other reps, his conversion rate out of stage 3 is like half as good as everybody else. He's got a problem in stage 3. Go get after that. Go coach that. Go fix that. This is the vision that we would love sales managers to live in, right? They're SDR managers, AE managers, and this is essentially what Atrium does. And one of the things that's really great about it is it takes about 90 seconds to turn it on, and it's extraordinarily easy to weave into your managerial operating rhythm for this information to come to you in your email, in Slack. Yeah, there's a web app as well, but like weave it into your operating rhythm, so you're just infused with data, and you're outperforming as a manager and improving rep performance rather than kind of like managing by gut, shooting from the hip. And so literally what we say is that we just focus on helping sales managers use data to improve team performance. And we work with north of 200 companies to do just that. So we're big sales nerds. That's what we do. Sales nerds from a content standpoint, sales nerds from a software standpoint. Cool. So now what we're going to talk about a little bit here is how to get good at reading this and like orienting and deciding, right? Because it's one thing to have all those assets in the operating rhythm in order to consume them. But if you're not able to interpret them, it's going to be problematic there, right? The joke that we like to say is, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around, does it make a noise? If you've got an SDR performance dashboard and no one ever looks at it or interprets it, like, are the SDRs actually doing any work, or are they playing Call of Duty? And so the way to do this is essentially we're going to do 3 steps. We're going to detect the issue. We're going to diagnose what the upstream consequence is, or the upstream cause of it is, and then we're going to communicate that using the places that were on the calendar already to do this. So how do we do this? Well, from a detection standpoint, usually what you want to do is you want to look at where on a rep by rep basis, because reps are the fundamental unit of production or non-production in an organization. So just only looking at team totals and things like that abstracts away potential issues with respect to a rep. So you kind of see that. You can kind of see this right here, right? We got it. If we were only looking at the totals, the team totals here on these customer-facing meetings, we would miss the fact that it's these reps that are pulling things down. So what we're going to do is we're going to look on a per rep basis. And we're going to do a couple things. We're going to look at what they're doing right now compared to their past performance. Are they off? Are they out? Are they better? Right? Like, that's something's changed. Are they off? We're going to look at them as compared to their peers. Again, are they off? Are they light? Are they crushing? What's going on here? Because usually these folks have similar sales motions, the same number of hours in the day. So if they're behaving differently and the metrics are different, there's probably something there to be sniffed out and done thing. Or are they not hitting goals? Right? Or the inverse for all of these, like, oh man, this person's win rate is so much better than it used to be, over the trailing 4, like their win rate this quarter is so much better than over the trailing 3 quarters. What happened? That's awesome. Let's get everybody else to do that. Right? Oh man, this rep's ASP is so much higher, is 30% higher than all of their peers. What's going on there? Right? Let's investigate that. Oh, I just I've been asking for an extra seat each time. I just added it to the proposal. Oh, and that works? Yeah, it works. Oh, well, not all the time, but like 50% of the time or 30% of the time. Wow. All right, let's get everybody to do that. So then once we found that issue, we want to diagnose, and we'll figure out, and the way that we do this is by going upstream to the precursor metrics to whatever the metric is that you're kind of seeing an issue on. We'll get into this a little bit in some of these graphics here, and then we're going to talk about it. Right? You can't just like detect an issue, diagnose it, and be like, all right, I figured it out. I hope they do too. This is your job as a manager, is to bridge that last mile. So to kind of give you an example here, this is super basic here, where we're just looking at some kind of like revenue formula metrics here for a set of reps. You can see these are the same reps. So Tank Metalfoot, Bentina, whatever, Bonnie Hops, blah, 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 right? Same people on each of these tiles. And then in this case, what we're looking at is revenue formula stuff. So like opportunity ownership, new opportunity inflow, win rates, and ASP. And really quickly, what we can see is that like Tank is really doing a great job from an opportunity ownership standpoint for last quarter. New opportunity inflow, kind of in band with everybody else. Seems like this is a little bit light for this guy, but we'll talk about him later. Win rates looking good here too. ASP. Okay, that's fine. Right, like seems like he's in the mix with everybody else. Seems like he's a little bit light with respect to average selling price here. Cool. We've detected a potential issue here. And what we can do is we can go upstream, kind of figure out where that's coming from. And then that, if we so chose, we might spend our time trying to remediate that, because everything else looks like it's like in band here. And so kind of other examples here would be, looking at those individuals versus each other. So like this person right here, from a customer facing meeting standpoint this month, totally hitting the cover off the ball. Man, ton of meetings. What's going on down here, Nutsy? What's happening? Right? Or similarly over time, kind of like changes in behavior. So you can kind of see this, like who's our orange guy, Brer Rabbit, like was up here, has changed as compared to himself. Right? So he has changed as compared to himself. Some of these other people have not really changed as compared to themselves. Like who's the green one here? Murloc, right? Murloc always kind of been low, right? Judy always kind of been low. there. So these are examples of detecting, right? Detecting what's going on here. Another way you can do this is with software that actually monitors this for you and does some of that statistical analysis for you. So rather than you having to use your eyeballs to sort this out, instead the math is done by something else. So in this case, you can see, automatic identification of, oh, hey, this rep right here has 40% fewer new opportunities flowing into their pipe as compared to their peers. That's probably going to be a problem for them if we don't get ahead of that, right? Similarly, this person's outperforming. They've got more new opportunities coming to their pipe as compared to their historical averages there. That's really great. What's going on there? Can we get other people to do that? And so these are some of the examples, or these are the assets that I was referring to earlier about this notion of like going right, going upstream to drivers. So one of the things that, so this is the revenue formula right here. We've got our bookings right here. Where do bookings come from? They come from wins, crossed with ASP, crossed with deal cycle. Okay, well, where do wins come from? Well, wins come from win rate, crossed with attempts. Where does win rate come from? Well, win rate comes from a lot of places, right? It comes from conversion rates between stages. It can come from how on top of somebody's pipe they are, and opportunity progressions. But so if you have a situation where a rep is tracking poorly with respect to their bookings, or they're, in the last time interval, last quarter, what have you, they were light, you can go right and say, hey, did they not have as many wins as they needed? No, they were fine on wins. Oh, okay. Well, is it just because like their deal cycle elongated? No, the deal cycle was fine. It actually looked like their ASP was the problem. Okay, well, where does ASP come from? Well, was their average op size too low? Or did they have enough ops in their pipe? And as a result, but the average size was too low, where they were kind of like, fishing for small fish. Were they doing a poor job of multi-threading into the organization, so they weren't able to sell as many seats or as much volume of product that they needed to do? Did they spend time on their small deals as opposed to their big deals? Was their win rate per deal size light? Were they losing their big deals but winning all their small deals? So those would be the things to investigate if you have an ASP problem. Versus if you have a win rate problem, these would be things to investigate over here. And you do the same thing with SDRs as well, where the output of an SDR's success, of course, is pipeline generation. And then kind of where does that come from? Well, it comes from opportunities that have been accepted, which comes from op acceptance rate and op submitted. Okay, well, what's the problem here? Do we have an op submittal problem, or do we have an acceptance problem? Let's say that if we have a submitted problem, where's that coming from? Is it coming from a lack of quantity of prospecting activity, or is it coming from a deficit in quality of prospecting? Oh, actually, you're sending plenty of emails and touching plenty of accounts. It just looks like your email response rate is just like the pits, man. So let's go ahead and figure out what that issue is. Like, why is your email response rate so bad? Oh, you're using last quarter's cadences. Oh, let's fix that. Or, oh man, your contact selection is off. You're targeting the wrong personas. And so by going upstream, what we can do is we can investigate where that issue is and fix it. Right. And so these are some of the ways of making sure how to systematize this and allow you to loop back, as kind of noted earlier. We'll send out these slides. Afterwards, but this is a template that I've thrown together here on, it's a one-on-one working doc template, and then this is a QBR template here that can be used for recurring kind of QBR investigation, like we were talking about before, where like you got your highlights, like, hey man, you kicked ass, that's great. Where's the lowlights here? What's our plan for the coming quarter here? Right, this is where we set our intention for the coming quarter, and then of course we execute on that on our recurring one-on-ones. Great. So we've got about 10 minutes left here, and so I want to take us through some examples of data-driven coaching, in the wild, if you will. So one thing that I like to do with my staff is in those one-on-ones, I actually have a coaching dash that is full of tiles that are specific to the thing that we're doing, like that we're focusing on with that rep there. So in my, so I have a specific coaching dashboard that's different on a per rep basis. So like the assets that have been populated into that dashboard. And again, we were talking about how like the way to think about a dashboard, it's used for a specific part of your operating rhythm. In this case, this is a dashboard that is specifically focused on the metrics that we're coaching right now, the metrics that reflect the behaviors that we're coaching right now. And this is going to be different on a per rep basis. So first example here, we had a situation where a rep was on track to miss for a month, and it was really confusing. We're like, because high performing rep, trying to figure out like what the heck is going on there. And so what was weird, of course, immediately what we went to and said like, okay, well, like let's look at those upstream characteristics. Was it, is it an insufficient win? It was insufficient win. Was the win rate problem? No, it's actually like the win rate's fine. It's insufficient wins. Okay, well that would indicate that like there's something going on with an attempts problem here. So let's go ahead and look at op inflow. All right, and so you can see here, it's actually that rep is like fine as compared to themselves historically, and also in the mix with everybody else. So like that actually wasn't a problem. But when we dug in a little bit further and looked at a little bit more of a sophisticated metric of how many ops we're getting to Disco Plus, right? So it's one thing to have an opportunity come into your name, being handed to you via SDR, that in a stage 0 situation or a stage in a stage 0 kind of like meeting pending situation. It's another thing to see that those actually progress. And so one of the KPIs that we pay attention to in our organization is the different stages that are reached, so like quantity of stages that are reached. And so what you can see here is like, for whatever reason in April there was like, oh boop, right, boop, kind of dipped down a little bit there, and in terms of, so there were lots of ops coming in the pipe, but actually the number that we're getting to Disco Plus kind of dipped, which would probably also be reflected in the conversion rate as well. Okay, cool. Well, like kind of frustrating that we missed that. Better, live and learn. But importantly, we're not going to miss it again. And so what we did as a result of that was we said, hey, we're going to start tracking those Disco Pluses on a weekly or monthly basis, so we don't get blindsided by that. And moreover, we're going to set a goal on how many ops get to Disco Plus, get to that stage, as different from new op inflow, right? We talked about new op inflow. That was actually the thing that head faked us. But no, we want to see actually how many are getting to Disco Plus, right? And then we want to have that monitor for us. And so we've never really had that problem again with that rep. And then moreover with others as well, because it turns out if one rep can have a problem, other reps can have that same problem as well. And so what we did was we put in place a system by which to catch that from an early warning indicator standpoint of somebody being like potentially being light with respect to opportunities that are getting out of stage 0 that are getting to Disco Plus. Second example here is a little more nuanced. There we had a rep who was having issues moving ops through the funnel. Right? So the first one was kind of more of a quantity behavior. This is going to be a little bit more of a quality thing. So we had a rep. This is a view of conversion rate on a stage by stage basis. So these are the different stages down here, right? So like meeting pending, security review, proposal, contract out, etc. Right? And so what you can see here is this is the conversion rate on the y-axis here that shows you what proportion of those opportunities that are going to get out of that stage. And what you can see is this is a rep right here in orange as compared to his peers. So the blue here is peers. And so what you can see is the areas where he's light as compared to his peers. Like he's light getting things out of meeting pending, he's light getting things out of proposal, kind of getting those in a paper process, and he's light with respect to conversion out of contract out, which conversion out of contract out goes to close one, which is kind of important, right? And so what we saw these issues here in these particular stages. So we knew that these were the places where behaviors needed to change in the sales process. And so what we did was we did a couple of things. We started working on improving their behavior at the top of the funnel. So getting out of meeting pending, getting out of discovery. This is actually looking at that conversion rate out of discovery, right, on a month-by-month basis here. And so you can see that rep was a little bit light here in the orange. And then once we started focusing on that, bink, jumped up, right? So we changed his behavior. Hey, you're having a problem getting things out of discovery. Let's go ahead and talk about doing a good job of setting next steps, making sure that we're doing really good discovery that illuminates a lot of pain, such that somebody's really excited to get that next meeting on the calendar, and then ensure that you're actually doing that. Behavior changed, showed up in the metrics, things are good. Similarly, by being more effective at getting things out of discovery, this rep gave himself more at bats. Right, getting things out of discovery. In our case, we have a pilot-based sales motion where organizations have a live Atrium account to kind of like show them what it looks like with their teams. Lo and behold, you kind of saw like the volume of number of ops that were getting into that state, and then bing, jumped up crazily because converting way more of those at the top of the funnel here. So the conversion rate went up. And so the same number of at-bats now getting way more hits here, which is fantastic. And so even if the win rate had stayed the same as previously, like from those pilot situations, even holding that steady, just by giving yourself way more at-bats, you're going to have more wins, you're going to have more bookings. But the good news is that we actually worked on that late stage behavior as well. And so this was the win rate from proposal. So previously this rep had a little bit lighter win rate, kind of like it was like a 50-50 shot on whether or not a deal was going to go from proposal to close one. And by doing a better job of some of those behaviors, those down funnel behaviors, business case construction, like focusing on doing a good job of like getting to power, et cetera, was able to jump up that win rate from the proposal there. So not only did this rep give himself more at bats here, right, getting into more pilots, he also hit the ball harder, right? Was doing a better job on win rate from proposal. And so what you can see here is after that coaching behavior, he's now much higher, getting out of meeting pending, getting out of manager reviews, getting out of proposal here as compared to his peers. Right, so he was down here in these various behaviors, and whoop, right, we bent the curve up there. And so as a result, you can see this was all of his down funnel pipeline, right? Whereas before, it kind of had like a little bit of a leaky pipeline where things would like fall out of the pipe because they weren't converting. Now you can see without even more new op inflow, he's just retaining way more of that pipe, and good things are going to happen there, which is absolutely fantastic. Kind of last example here. It's pretty fun, kind of like nuanced one. So we had a rep who was struggling with kind of call behavior, and specifically as related to closing behavior. You can see this is, again, conversion rates on a stage-by-stage basis down here. And so you can see that this rep has really major problems getting out of proposal and converting from contract. And then moreover, one of the things you can see, so what we did was we focused on improving their closing behavior, right? Asking for the business, right? Driving to a close. And you could see that their win rate from proposal jumped up from where it had previously been up to here. The other problem that the rep haven't had as well was couldn't shut up, right? Which is a really big problem, not just from a discovery standpoint. And like if the rep is talking, guess what? The prospect is not telling them their problems, and also not talking about if the rep is on the right track. Similarly, because you should always be qualifying, right, and trial closing, does this align with solving the problems that we discussed earlier? How do you see this working in your workflow? How would this impact that problem A that we talked about previously? And then letting the prospect then go off on that. If you're talking too much, you can't let them do that. And so what you could see here is that their talk ratio was substantially higher than everybody else's. When we started coaching on that, you can see it dove down here, right? So she started biting her tongue more, right? Clenching her mouth when she wanted to talk, and saying, say more about that. Tell me more about that. Can you expand on that? And this positively impacted win rates as a result, which you can actually see right there. So those are essentially like a set of mechanisms by which to use data to improve rep performance through data-driven coaching. Obviously, we covered a lot of content here today. Pretty excited about it. This recording will be sent out to everybody after the fact, along with the slides. But just to remind folks, we think about this stuff all day long at Atrium because Atrium exists to help sales managers use data to improve team performance. And we work with hundreds of customers in order to do that. So have a great day, everybody. I hope you enjoy the rest of the Megasco. And if you want to reach out to us and talk about data-driven sales management, we'd love to chat with you.
Yes, see you at Melanie's keynote in like an hour. Thank you, everyone. Bye.